I'm Hallie Jackson with a breaking news special report. Donald Trump on trial with maybe just 2 days left till the jury gets this case. We're hearing in the last hour the closing arguments could begin as soon as Tuesday. After a pretty testy day in court, raised voices, intense questions, and one thing those 12 jurors are going to have to consider. Do you believe Michael Cohen? Because that's the crux of this whole cross-examination of the prosecution's star witness. Really, this whole trial with the defense only needing to convince just one person on this jury that Michael Cohen undercut his own testimony. That Donald Trump's former right-hand man lied and lied some more with little to lose. He's going to be back on the stand Monday, and the judge is telling both sides, get ready to wrap it all up. Things got pretty spicy today. Blanche, at one point, Todd Blanche, the former president's lead defense attorney, shouting that was a lie when asking about an October 2016 phone call to Mr. Trump's bodyguard. This was a really key moment, folks. Cohen stood by his story, saying that he talked to Mr. Trump on the phone about Stormy Daniels during the call and didn't just talk about prank calls from a teenager. We're going to get into that in a sec. Remember, that call and calls like it are key because Cohen is the only person who can directly implicate Mr. Trump in this alleged scheme. In plain English, he's the guy who can connect the dots back to that so-called hush money payment, that $130,000 to Stormy Daniels for her silence about an affair the former president denies. This is the centerpiece of what prosecutors have described as this election interference scheme. Most of the day was spent hitting at Cohen's credibility, painting him as somebody out for revenge. Asked if he was angling for a job like chief of staff, Cohen said, that was for my ego, yes. Asked point blank, does the outcome of this trial affect you personally? Michael Cohen said yes. All of it playing out in front of more than a dozen Republican allies of Mr. Trump who showed up in person. You see some of them here. And check this out. Look at this line outside court. You see it stretching all the way back. Our team says the person at the front of that line paid $1,800 to start sitting there Tuesday night so they could get a seat inside. We'll say it again. New York's hottest club is a downtown Manhattan courtroom. We're going to get into that later on. But first, we're taking you inside all those rooms cameras cannot be in for every key element coming out of court. What it means, why it matters, and most importantly now, what is coming next? Our team of reporters and legal and political experts is ready to break it all down. We want to start with Rahima Ellis, who's live for us outside court. What's interesting here, Rahima, is we seem to be barreling towards the finish here. Closing arguments may be starting as early as Tuesday, but one of our colleagues, Tom Winter, hears that there's a potential witness for the defense who says he'll be around next week if they need him, right?
Yeah, that's what Tom Winter is telling us. And this person, we're told, his name is Robert Costello. He's a lawyer also. And he, according to Michael Cohen's testimony, he was relaying messages via Rudy Giuliani, who was President Trump's attorney, from Trump to Rudy Giuliani to Costello to Cohen about don't worry. And this was after Michael Cohen's apartment was raided by the FBI in 2018. They took his phones and they took material from his office. And the message from that Cohen is saying he got from Costello, sleep well tonight. You have friends in high places. And Cohen went on to say that he got messages via Costello, via Rudy Giuliani coming from Trump. And that was to say, stay in the fold. Don't flip. Don't speak. Now, might he be called as a witness for the defense? And that is to do what? To say that Michael Cohen is a liar, something that they've been saying all day, that they've been trying to get Michael Cohen to basically rebut his own statements of that he is essentially a serial liar. So could this be one more time that he's lying? We don't know yet whether or not Robert Costello will be called, but the defense has seemingly leaving that door open for the possibility that he would be called. We should say that the defense is also leaving the door open that there's a possibility that the former president, Donald Trump, might also be called. Hallie?
Rahima, talk a little bit more about this critical phone call that was the crux of what happened right before the lunch break, and things started to get a little bit explosive. It was one of the rare times that we've heard Todd Blanche raise his voice, according to our colleagues who were there in court and in the overflow room, seemingly to try to signal to the jury, you know, vocally, this is something important. Like, this is an important moment here as he's pressing Michael Cohen about this very specific call, whether it was a discussion with the former president's bodyguard about prank calls from a 14-year-old or whether it was about Stormy Daniels.
Yeah, and I'm going to show you a full screen here in just a second, because the defense seems to be resting on the notion that Donald Trump didn't know anything about this. In fact, they have pled not guilty to all of these 34 counts against them about falsifying records and conspiracy. So here's the full screen of it saying, from Blanche, the defense attorney, do you agree with me that when you pled guilty of a crime and you are lying, that's not accepting responsibility for it? And Michael Cohen saying, I accepted responsibility and I'm suffering the consequences of it. Again, they're trying to get Michael Cohen, basically their defense is that he was doing this in order to please the boss so that he could be in good favor with the boss. And he was acting on his own, not necessarily acting on the orders from Donald Trump. Hallie?
Rahima Ellis, thank you very much. I want to bring in our legal experts now. Danny Savalos, Debbie Hines is joining us as well. Debbie, I'll start with you. Thank you for being here in Washington. As a prosecutor watching this cross-examination go down today, would you be sweating it out a bit that the jury now has all weekend, the next 3 days, to marinate on what they just heard? These questions of credibility about Michael Cohen, the repeated instances where he acknowledged lying.
Not really. And
Okay.
here's the reason. This jury has been sitting on this trial 4 out of the 5 days a week. They have other things to do on the weekend. They have their own real lives. So, yes, they're going to think about it, but I don't think they're going to be marinating over it because they're just going to be going on. Now, it would be different if this were the closing argument, and then you send them out for the weekend, and they have all weekend to think about that. But I don't think so for cross-examination.
I want to come back to that point in a second when we talk about timeline, because that may, in fact, be the reality here. But before we get there, Danny, to you, you've talked about how the goal of a cross-examination is not supposed to be about breaking people down. It's about getting concessions. In your view, did Todd Blanche get enough of those to put some of those, you know, worms of doubt into the minds of the jury?
He did, but he might have been able to do it in a more efficient way. There were a couple moments today that were good for the defense, but there were a lot of moments that felt kind of plodding. And the challenge for the cross-examiner, and really it's tough for me to criticize because I fall victim to this too, when you have so much material, it's hard to organize it, and it's hard to know when enough is enough. As a cross-examining attorney, you want to expose every lie this person has ever told, because to you, it's relevant, and the jury might think it's relevant too. But it's really hard to edit. And sometimes you have to say, well, I might be able to get him on this issue, but I'll leave it out. Or when Todd Blanche would have Michael Cohen on the hook and Cohen would fight back on admitting something was true or not, then sometimes it's time to move on. Other times it's time to hammer down on an issue. It's really hard to know. And look, as an attorney, you just don't want to leave anything out there. So I'm guilty of this, too. I tend to keep going and keep pushing an issue, maybe beyond when I should have.
As a news anchor, I can sometimes relate to not stopping talking when perhaps maybe I should. Debbie, to you here, the prosecution is going to get a chance to do a redirect here. So in other words, they're going to get a chance to try to reset a bit of the narrative that the defense, that Todd Blanche has just tried to lay out over the course of the last however many hours, 2 days, with Michael Cohen. What do they need to do? What's going to be their goal?
I think their only goal really is to focus in on the important things. I mean, Todd Blanche went through, like, what is it, a day and a half over lies? I mean, how many ways can you spell liar, you know?
Well, that phone call discussion seemed to be fairly damning.
The phone call is where I think they will hammer in, definitely with that, but not all the previous, you know, you told this or you said that. And definitely, I don't think even on the recordings, even though, yes, it's unethical to record your own client, but I think that phone call was, I mean, my ears perked up when I heard that, and I think that's where they have to go back and really basically build Cohen up again, so that the jury is not left with the impression that, did he talk to Donald Trump or did he talk to the bodyguard? He was calling the bodyguard's phone number. Why do we know he was talking to Donald Trump and not to the bodyguard? They really have to build that back up because that's a key element of their case.
Danny, do you think, and I know this is a bit of tea leaf speculation here, we are not in the minds of the jury, we don't know what they're thinking, but do you believe, based on what you heard in court today from the notes inside, that the defense did an effective job in raising questions about Cohen's own testimony with what he said today?
They did. But in many ways, a lot of the stuff they hit on were things we knew they were going to hit on. We knew that Cohen was a liar. We knew that Cohen has a checkered past. We knew that Cohen has a motive, and that motive is revenge. So that was all going to come out. But at times, the cross-examination probably wasn't as tight as it could have been. And when you leave a witness, a hostile witness, on the stand longer than you should and ask that one additional question, you really run the risk that that witness is going to zing you. Because remember, that's what Michael Cohen is trying to do with every single question.
So what should the defense do next, Danny? Do you believe that they should call another witness like Bob Costello, let's say? Do you believe that we are headed toward closings maybe as soon as Monday? For sure, it sounds like Tuesday based on what the judge has laid out.
I tend to be very risk averse, so I might not call any witnesses at all, especially if at most I was only thinking of calling one witness. I would rather just rest unless I really needed something out of Robert Costello or some other witness. I would tend to lean towards just resting and then arguing that we didn't call any witnesses essentially because we don't have the burden and they have the burden and they didn't meet it. We had to sit there and listen to it the whole time and they haven't proven their case.
Debbie, to you, because this gets back to something that we talked about right at the top of this discussion. It is entirely possible, and again, we're like tiptoeing to the world of hypotheticals here, but it's possible that the jury gets this case, court is not scheduled to be in session on Wednesday, and then in the midst of deliberations, they take this perhaps, potentially, break, kind of in the middle of the week. Is that damaging to either side, or is that simply the reality when there are such things as weekends and federal holidays that line up with these kind of proceedings?
That is the one thing that concerns me for both sides, or more so for the prosecution, because I don't recall having, and I've tried hundreds of cases, I don't recall having a situation where once we got to closing argument that it was kind of chopped up. We have the closing here. I mean, I just think that's very problematic. Most cases, they run very smoothly. You start with closing, you do the prosecutor, you do the defense, prosecution does rebuttal, and because this is New York, then the jury instructions is set forth to the jury, and then they go out to deliberate. So I just see that as potentially, breaking up, and I just usually that does not happen, and in a case this important, it should not occur.
Debbie, thank you so much. Debbie Hines, Danny Savalos, we're glad to have you both with us. Appreciate it. I want to bring in somebody else who is, in some ways, a legal analyst who has an inside look at the defendant in this case, Mr. Trump's former attorney, one of them, Michael Vanderveen. Thank you very much for being with us here.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so based on the conversation we were just having with our NBC News legal analyst, do you think that the defense should wrap it up here? Leave it on this note, leave the jury with what they heard from Michael Cohen and this cross-examination by Todd Blanche?
I think it depends a little bit about what happens with the redirect. I think they'll redirect. There'll be probably limited cross to that redirect. And it depends upon what the judge's ruling is with respect to the expert they want to call. In pretrial motions in the case, they had been saying they wanted to call an expert in election law, election finance law, and it was really tailored very narrowly by the judge in his rulings as to what this witness could say. They would like to get that witness in and kind of open the barn door on what he can say because, you ask an election finance expert, it's kind of wishy-washy, well, under this circumstance it could be, maybe under this circumstance it's not illegal. So it would be a strong witness for them, you want to put everything in, once the game's over, you're not going to be able to come back and play again.
Yeah, you want to leave it on the field.
I think they've had a very strategic, well-thought-out defense in this case, and I think they're going to be best off just to stick to it.
What about the former president himself? You, of all people, know he likes to see an aggressive defense. He likes his people to be aggressive on his behalf. Did Todd Blanche, in your view, pass that test?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I mean, you can tell because at the end, when he came out of court, he thanked his lawyers. So that means he's real happy with them. And he even talked about paying them and really not regretting it so much. So I think he's really happy.
He did say he'd prefer not to pay him quite so much money.
Well, that's not just him. But, I think they had a strong day. I think that in the room, they felt like they had the day. When you saw Todd Blanche come out afterwards, he was light. He was bouncing around. He was laughing. He was smiling. He felt good about it. From what I was reading on the screens today, it seemed like he had a really good rhythm. There weren't a lot of objections interrupting him, and Cross is very much rhythmic. It's like music to a certain extent.
But what about Danny's point that they could have been a little bit more efficient, that it could have felt a little tighter for a jury? Because listen, you and I are steeped in this stuff, right? I mean, you follow this, I follow that. The jury's following it, but they haven't been following it for 8 years, for 6 years.
Well, I've done a lot of cross-examinations, and in your head, it's going the way you think it's going. But, sometimes it gets a little rough because you're really reacting to what the answers are. And in your cross, there are 3 ways you can go, at least. And it really depends upon what's happening in that interaction. So I really thought it was a pretty smooth cross-examination, and it's really tough to second-guess the guy who's asking the questions.
Well, one of the things he's doing is he's leaving the door open potentially to the possibility of maybe, and I'm using a lot of caveat words, of maybe having Mr. Trump testify. The vibe we're getting is that is very unlikely to happen. If you were in that position, with all of the risks, Michael, that it would entail to put Donald Trump on the stand, would you do it? Would you not? Is he going to steamroll you either way, depending on what he wants to do?
First of all, I don't think it's so unlikely that he testifies, frankly. I think his lawyers will be telling him.
And opens himself up to a cross-examination from the prosecution?
I think his lawyers are going to be saying to him, hey, we're doing real well here. I think we got daylight. I think this could be a not guilty. But he's gnawing at the bit to testify. That's just another place for him to be at the podium and giving election talk. I mean, he wants to.
But a way riskier place, of course.
Sure, but
when he's at a campaign rally, nobody's interrupting him. Nobody's pushing back and questioning him.
He's been a risk taker his entire life. I mean, I think he's gnawing at the bit to testify. I think he wants the opportunity to defend himself, and I think he knows he won't have that chance again. He testified in the civil trial, of course. And I know that he would like to if he could.
This is now if my math is correct, third day in a row this week he's had Republican allies in court with him. What do you think it does for him to have those folks sitting behind him?
Oh, I think it makes him feel great. I think it makes it justifies to him that it's his defense. It justifies to him that this is, in his words, a sham prosecution. And I think it makes him feel much more comfortable all throughout the day that he's got supporters there. And that's not just him. That's any defendant, When you try cases and you're sitting there with just the lawyers and nobody else, it's good to be able to look back and see your family there or your friends there or your supporters there. And I think it's been very helpful for him, probably. What the public perception is, or the jury's, more importantly, the jury's perception is, that I don't know, because I saw some cards going in there, but we'll see.
We'll talk about that a bit more coming up in just a sec. Michael Vanderveen, thank you very much for being here on set with us here in
D.C.
Made
my day.
Appreciate it. We'll see you soon, I'm sure. Thanks. I want to bring in now the aforementioned team of political experts and reporters, specifically, who know this case and this defendant very well. New York Times investigative reporter Suzanne Craig, who's been in the courtroom today. Yeah. New York Times Chief White House correspondent Peter Baker, and Vanity Fair special correspondent Brian Stelter is with us. Suzanne, let me start with you. Deference to the person who was there in the overflow room today. This was the toughest questioning that Michael Cohen's faced. We saw, as we've laid out here over the course of this special report, some of those spicy, fiery moments, right? Raised voices, some intensity. What was Cohen's demeanor like? How did you read it as somebody who's been watching him now over the course of the last 3 days?
Well, it's interesting because I was just listening to Michael about it being a good day, and I'd like to sort of step back a little bit and take people into the courtroom.
Please.
And why I think they did land a punch, but I want to put that in context a little bit. I thought Michael Cohen's demeanor, he was cool and calm. I mean, he has been like that throughout. The only time we heard Michael Cohen raise his voice today was on a tape they played from one of his podcasts where he was railing against Donald Trump. But the rest of it, on the stand, jurors saw a composed Michael Cohen. But today, it was interesting. It started the morning session and for hours, and it went on the previous day as well, the last day of testimony, very much trying to impeach Michael Cohen's character. You've seen time and time again, they keep bringing up that he has lied, and it's not minor lies, it's lies under oath. And the suggestion is he's lied under oath before, and now he's under oath and will lie again. It was meandering at times, and you were wondering where they were going with it. I mean, one is they just want to impeach his character. But then we got to this moment today about a phone call that Michael Cohen had made to Keith Schiller, who's Donald Trump's body man. And it was important because that was the call where Michael Cohen had allegedly, Keith Schiller had handed the phone to Donald Trump during this minute and 36-second call and told him that the payment to Stormy Daniels had been made. But what we learned today, and I thought the defense was effective at, is sort of planting in the juror's mind that maybe that call wasn't about Stormy Daniels.
That's right.
Maybe, in fact, it was about these prank calls that he was getting, these hang-up calls that he was getting where he'd actually allegedly unmasked the person. It was a 14-year-old kid, and Michael threatened to report this to the Secret Service and then called Keith Schiller. I thought it was an effective cross, and I think that they did. It put a dent in him. I think it raised some questions about the nature of the call. But I want to say that it's one call in a pretty thick stack of evidence that Donald Trump's lawyers haven't gone near. They have stated his character. They have not gone to all the other testimony, not just that Michael Cohen has brought in, but other witnesses in the case have backed Michael Cohen up on meetings and on conversations and on records. So I think that I think Donald Trump's lawyers today probably were happy because they landed a blow at Michael Cohen, but I'm just wondering in the big picture how much it's going to affect what the jury's thinking.
Peter, one of the things you heard from Michael Vanderveen, who was just here with us on set, Mr. Trump's former attorney, different case, et cetera, here in Washington, was this idea that he had these Republican surrogates behind him. Surrogates, by the way, is not my word. That is Donald Trump's word. That is what he's called them. You look at the list here. We're going to show it up. 12 Republicans, some of the most conservative in the House of Representatives. Unlike some of the folks that we saw earlier in the week, this didn't feel Veep stakes-y. This felt like a Republican roll call. How do you see it?
Well, it's fascinating because, in fact, it took a while till you got them comfortable with the idea that they should show up in a courtroom.
It was like
now
Rick
they
Scott,
have, right?
And then it was
and
like
then they all started to join in. They decided they could do it without jumping off a deep end of the pool and worrying about hitting their head. They seem to feel like this is actually not bad for them. It could be good for them. They're going to be currying favor with the guy who's the putative nominee of their party, maybe the next president of the United States, and he's going to remember it. He remembers when you were there. He specifically remembers, for instance, when Mark Meadows' wife continued to campaign for him after the Access Hollywood tape. He brought up all the time. It was a key to Mark Meadows' relationship with the president for a long time. So he is going to know these people. He will know that they are there. He keeps track.
You made an interesting point, Brian. Senator John Fetterman, Democrats have noticed this as well. He called it the Hunger Games of Simp up there in Manhattan today. You made the point, the comparison. Try to imagine if Democratic lawmakers showed up for the trial of Senator Menendez, which is happening right now, or the trial of Hunter Biden, which is set to happen in a couple of weeks from now. Explain that.
It's very hard to imagine that anybody's going to come to the defense of either of those men when we're talking about Democratic elected officials. And I think that speaks to the difference between the Democratic Party right now and the Republican Party. You think about this as another example of norms eroding in the Trump era. There had been an unspoken rule, not entirely, but mostly an unspoken rule that lawmakers stay out of the court system, the judiciary. You let a trial play out, and then you react when the trial is over and the verdict is read. That has been the standard, not every day, but most of the days in Washington and beyond. And we're seeing that norm completely blow up during this Trump trial. And as you said, Peter, not right away, not on day one. It took, days 15, 16, 17 of the trial before these lawmakers felt comfortable flying up to D.C.
Well, it's not the first norm that the former president has broken, of course, in his lifetime here. It won't be the last, I doubt it. Suzanne, there's this new poll out today as we talk about the political backdrop of this, because there is one, because as is evidenced by the conversation that Peter and Brian and I are having here on set, the campaign and the legal drama is all one and the same, right? It is a collision course, and this is showing it in the most vivid of ways. Shows former President Trump, President Biden neck and neck inside the margin of error. Does that sound familiar? Because that's where this race has been for a while now, right? And there's still this really open question of, does this particular case shake anything loose in the minds of voters as we are now getting closer, at least towards maybe the first debate and the Republican convention here?
I'm the worst person to ask this. I just hate polls. So, the poll that matters.
You're welcome to veto it. You're welcome to veto the question, and I'll give it to your colleague, Peter. It's up to you.
No. But I'd like to hear Peter's take on that. But it has been interesting, though, I've got to say, just seeing the collision of the law and politics, like the idea that they landed, I was listening to Michael's, discussing sort of what a victory this was today. They landed a political victory today. I mean, in court, I thought more so that than one in court. I thought it was an important day for them, but there's just so much other evidence that has gone just completely not addressed at all. And I think the other thing is just thinking that Donald Trump would testify. If he does, it is a political move, pure and simple. There is no reason for this trial. There would be no reason for him to get on the stand. I can't see any upside, but there's a political upside. The gag order is another issue. He can't talk, so he's got his surrogates coming to court. Politics is at play every day here. In the middle of a courtroom. I'm, a reporter who shows up to cover court cases and things like that, and I'm just fascinated to see the politics being infused with it.
And Peter, you're the flip side of that coin. You're a political reporter who's showing up now to do the court piece of it, right? I mean, talk to me how you see that.
Yeah, because this is, in fact, a political event, whether it's intended to be that or not. Obviously, it's not what former President Trump says it is in terms of some sort of a, ordered by Biden. That's obviously not true. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. But it has such a bearing on our politics because it's happening in the middle of a campaign. And why is it that Trump and Biden agreed to a debate on June 27th yesterday? For Trump, the obvious answer is he may be a convicted felon by that point, and if so, he would like to talk about something other than that. He would like to change the subject. That debate would be an opportunity for him to refocus the conversation on the campaign and the choice between him and Biden rather than talking about his legal issues. Now, he may not be a convicted felon by then. Let's be obvious. We should make sure we allow for that possibility. We don't know what the answer is. And I think that's actually, for politics' sake, that's what still matters. It's the outcome. By the time voters vote, they will know. They will not be focusing on Michael Cohen's testimony or Stormy Daniels' testimony. They're going to say either he's a felon or he's gotten off of the hung jury or an acquittal. I
suspect, though, here's what I want political scientists to figure out this time next year. Did this period of a trial actually help Donald Trump? Did this period of the trial help him in the following way? The coverage of Trump is all about whether he's the victim of a persecution, whether this prosecution is fair or not. Especially in pro-Trump media, that's the storyline every single day.
That's right.
Definitely. Even hearing about the trial, though, no matter what you're watching, what you're reading, it's this sense that Donald Trump, it's all about Trump. It's not about his policy. It's not about his ideas for 2025. It's not about his agenda. It's not about abortion and reproductive rights. The focus is so much on these legal...
It's a little about abortion at some points, right? I mean, it was a few weeks back.
That's true, but I think overall, this narrative may be helping Trump. We're not talking about what he's saying at his rallies, how he's drifting off and talking about Hannibal Lecter. We're focused so much on the legal substance, and for good reason. But I suspect when political scientists study this next year, they'll see maybe Trump was benefiting in the spring from the lack of attention on his plans.
You bring up something interesting, which is this idea that some of the things that Donald Trump touches becomes a spectacle. And Peter, when you and I were covering the White House, I used to cover the White House in 2017 and on during the Trump administration, that was a comparison that happened a lot. It came up a lot, that things would just turn into spectacle land. And I look at the crowds of people lining up to get a seat inside court. $1,800 is not nothing to pay to get a good seat in the front of line so you can guarantee a spot in court for this momentous day. I mean, that is part of it, and you have to wonder that how much Mr. Trump wants to see that. I think he does. I think he wants to see those supporters out there with signs. I think he wants to hear that.
Of course it is. It's all about spectacle. I mean, that's what his whole political career has been about, because that's what his business career was about. Spectacle is what Donald Trump does. It's how he got to where he is. It's his specialty. It's his superpower in some way.
It turns on some people, but it turns off a lot of others. And I still think political burnout, exhaustion, fatigue is the story of our time. There are so many people that don't want to hear about Trump anymore. When they hear about this trial, it just causes them to tune out. Maybe they'll tune in for the verdict, though.
Suzanne Craig, last question to you. Verdict, we think maybe next week, based on the timeline? Realistic?
I'm not thinking verdict next week. Anything's possible. We got closing arguments in that next week, and then they're going to hand it to the jury. So I think we're probably looking that this could go in after the, after the long Memorial Day long weekend. But we're going to have closing arguments, it looks like, next week. So it's happening.
But will the jury really want to wait all that long weekend? Won't they want to get this over before the holiday? I guess we'll find out.
I just think scheduling, it's going to be really hard to pack it all in. It may not go to the jury until late next week. Yeah.
Suzanne Craig, Peter Baker, Brian Stelter. Just gives us more of an opportunity to talk. Thank you all for being with us here during our special report. Really appreciate it here. Donald Trump on trial. We're bringing it to you tonight. But we've got a lot of other big headlines as well. We're going to catch you up on all of it when we pick up regular programming right after the break. We're coming on the air with breaking news tonight. The governor of Texas now pardoning an ex-Army sergeant convicted of killing a Black Lives Matter protester. The new reaction just coming into us in the last little bit tonight. Plus, the New Jersey senator accused of bribery, revealing his wife's cancer diagnosis one day after his defense team appeared to try to throw her under the bus. How prosecutors are trying to lay out what they see as overwhelming evidence. With some news today on how much money there was laying around the senator's home. Plus, a group you probably didn't expect to be stepping into the political arena, the Satanic Temple. How they're trolling the religious right and fighting to protect the separation of church and state in tonight's original. Hey, I'm Hallie, and tonight we start with that breaking news out of Texas. The Republican governor there pardoning a man convicted of murdering a Black Lives Matter protester back in 2020. As we're just learning in the last couple of minutes here that he is now out of prison, meaning that 25-year sentence for former U.S. Army Sergeant Daniel Perry is now pardon. Again, this was for shooting and killing Garrett Foster, a 28-year-old man at a protest in Austin. It is nullified. All of Perry's rights are set to be restored. Perry admits to shooting Foster, who you see right here, while driving an Uber in Austin. And his attorneys argue that because Foster was armed, Perry was acting in self-defense. Governor Greg Abbott saying in a statement just last hour, Texas has, in his words, one of the strongest stand-your-ground laws in the country, and that, I'm quoting here, it cannot be nullified by a jury or a progressive district attorney. We should note our affiliate in Texas has reached out to the DA's office that prosecuted this case against Perry. No word yet. We're keeping an eye out for that. I want to get right to Kathy Park with more because the Texas governor previewed a move just like this if this pardon never made it to his desk. So what happens next?
Yeah, so as you just mentioned there, Perry, according to Texas officials, is no longer an inmate. He is a free man. It's unclear at this point when he was released, but one can assume it was shortly after this pardon was announced. But as far as what's next, he is no longer an inmate. And right now his rights have been restored. So as far as having access to a firearm, if he so chooses, he is legally allowed to do that at this point. But as you can imagine, there has been quick backlash and fallout ever since his pardon came out just a couple of hours ago. The DA who prosecuted the case, he issued a statement not too long ago, writing in part, they have sent a message to Garrett Foster's family, to his partner, and to our community that his life does not matter. They have sent the message that the service of the Travis County community members who served on the grand jury and trial jury does not matter. Also, the Texas AG releasing a statement as well, and his reaction to this, he wrote in part, Soros-backed prosecutors like Jose Garza do not get to pick and choose the rights we have as Americans, and I am relieved that justice has prevailed. And Hallie, just to kind of take you back to April of 2023, that's when Perry was convicted. Shortly after that, a lot of conservatives weighed in. They slammed the decision. And then that is when Governor Abbott quickly jumped into the conversation as well and said that he would move quickly to get this pardon underway. And here we are today. Hallie.
Kathy Park, thank you very much for that reporting into us late tonight. Appreciate it. Also tonight, we're getting an inside look at the raid of a Democratic senator's home in New Jersey, with testimony in Bob Menendez's bribery trial just wrapping up for the day. That's right after the senator, seen here leaving court in just the last few minutes, revealed that his wife/co-defendant is being treated for cancer. In a statement, the senator says his wife, Nadine, has stage 3 breast cancer, requiring a mastectomy. Says he's concerned about the advanced state of the disease. Remember, Nadine Menendez is a co-defendant here. Her trial is happening separately. And all of this comes after Menendez's legal team opened its case by appearing to point the finger at her for the presence of gold bars in the couple's home. The senator's defense attorney saying in court yesterday the senator didn't have a key to their bedroom closet where these gold bars were found, that only Nadine did, and that only Nadine knew what was inside. Menendez has more than those gold bars to worry about, of course. In new testimony today, an FBI agent described giving up on photographing the cash they were finding in the house and brought in counting machines instead because he says it was too much to count by hand. All of this allegedly part of the 18 federal charges Menendez faces. They're mostly felonies that have to do with him and his wife allegedly trading political favors for a lot of different kinds of fancy gifts. Also tonight, our first look at the makeup of the jury, 6 men, 6 women who will decide if Senator Menendez is guilty or not. NBC's Tom Winter is outside the courthouse in New York. Help us understand this very serious case of breast cancer for the senator's wife. And that is, I believe, part of why her trial is happening separately later, right? Because of some of these health concerns?
Well, that's exactly right, Hallie, and it's some of the legal concerns as well. So, look, they've taken a look at this case, and both attorneys for Nadine Menendez and for the senator talked to the judge in their filings prior to the jury even being brought in here and said, look, both sides are going to talk about the other, and you need to address this because it's very possible that they could be sitting at tables. And it's important to note they're not sitting, kind of at one side of the courtroom or the other. All the tables, prosecution, defense, all sitting in row after another. And so you would have a husband and wife eliciting testimony that could be very damning to the guilt for the other. And that's a big reason why this trial was separated in the first place. And now, of course, as you alluded to there, Hallie, we do have the health concern for Nadine Menendez. She has pleaded not guilty. Important to remember that. And so we don't know yet when she's going to testify in this case. When she's going to have her trial in this case.
The senator, of course, pleading not guilty as well. In witness testimony today, you saw the prosecution just getting right into it now with the FBI agent who led the raid on Menendez's house in Jersey. And it seems like the goal there was to throw an avalanche at the jury, to overwhelm them with the amount of what they found, with how much evidence they found.
Well, that's exactly right. You know, Hallie, yesterday I told you about the floor plans that Menendez's attorneys showed where the bed was in their bedroom versus whose closet was where. Today we got the full Zillow. I mean, we got a walking tour of the house, the federal agent going through room by room. This is what I found. Cash in boots, cash in duffel bags. And to your point, something you mentioned, this is the largest FBI field office in the country. They had to call out for reinforcements, the word that the agent used, to have agents bring those counting machines, the type that we see in movies, out there because they were finding much more cash than they expected. And normally they just take photographs. They just count it at the scene, take photographs, submit it for evidence, the type of images that we saw in the indictment, the type of images that they saw today. But there was so much cash, the FBI says, that they needed those counting machines just so they could get through the process of executing that search warrant. So it's indicative of the types of things that jurors are seeing. And we're going to get more testimony about that, as well as potentially some substantial testimony next week of exactly how this alleged scheme worked out.
Tom Winter, lots to watch. Thank you very much for being there. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, a Massachusetts teenager who participated in that spicy chip challenge apparently died from eating too much chili pepper extract, according to an autopsy report. Remember, this happened last year as part of that viral one-chip challenge. The 14-year-old also had an enlarged heart and a congenital heart defect, according to the report. The chip manufacturer, Pocky, pulled the product from shelves not long after he died. They have not responded to the AP's request for comment. Number 2, pretty scary scene out of Miami. Gunshots hitting a neighborhood there in the middle of the night. Wait till you listen to this. So it was just shot after shot after shot. There were actually more than just what you heard, putting bullets in homes and cars. Still not clear if anybody was hurt, but police say they're investigating. Number 3, TSA says it's getting ready for what's expected to be the busiest summer travel season in American history. Get ready. Memorial Day weekend next week. Something like 18 million people are set to be screened by the TSA during the holiday. The agency says, love them for stating the obvious, but give yourself time, plenty of it, when you get to the airport before getting on your flight. That's probably not the weekend to show up with no time to spare. Number 4, the VP accepting an invitation for a VP debate moderated by CBS sometime in July or August, according to the Biden campaign. Former President Donald Trump has said he may not announce his VP pick until closer to the GOP convention in July. But we already know that both Mr. Trump and President Biden are set for 2 debates this summer, obviously a third with the VP. We'll see if there's any more. Number 5, new surveillance video out of New York City shows the moment a guy tried to ambush a man and a woman walking a dog. Before the pair, look at this, they fought back. They ended up stabbing that would-be attacker over and over again and then took off. The man who was stabbed, the original attacker, was taken to the hospital and is expected to be okay. Police are still looking into this one. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because it's tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. Out of our Western Bureau, at least one person is dead and others in the hospital after this crash on a highway in Colorado. You see it there. Police say a car slammed into the back of a tanker truck, which had broken down along the shoulder. And then obviously, look at the flames. It just burst into flames. No word yet on what the tanker was carrying. The highway is going to stay shut down while crews clean up. Out of our Southern Bureau, Houston Astros pitcher Ronald Blanco now suspended for 10 games after umpires found something sticky on his glove during a game against Oakland. That obviously is against MLB rules. The team's general manager says Blanco is not going to appeal, including coming up new backlash against the Chiefs kicker who gave that very controversial commencement speech we told you about last night, criticizing things like Pride Month, COVID, women with careers. So is his career at risk now because of it? That's next. Some pressure is building off the field tonight for the Kansas City Chiefs kicker after what critics are calling his misogynistic comments at a college commencement. An NFL official saying those were personal remarks and that his views do not represent the league's. We're talking about Harrison Butker, of course, whose speech at a Catholic university over the weekend saw him railing on everything from abortion to birth control to Pride Month to COVID, with a big chunk of his address dedicated to his view that women should be homemakers and not so much pursuing careers outside the house. Here's what I'm talking about.
I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world.
Comments like those kicking up a lot of backlash for the reigning Super Bowl champ kicker, and a little bit of trolling, too. Look at what the LA Chargers did, giving Butker a cameo when they announced their schedule for next season with a Sims-themed video. Look at this. That's supposed to be Butker there in that number 7 jersey, helping out around the house. Being the homemaker he apparently believes simply women can be. NBC's Liz Kreutz is following this one for us. You know, what's interesting, Liz, is we talked about this last night on the show, and even in the course of the last 36 hours, there has been more and more backlash, more and more of a spotlight on Harrison Butker. The whole thing just keeps building momentum.
Exactly. It's the definition of going viral. It just keeps getting spread more and more, and then we keep getting more backlash. In fact, just moments ago, I saw that a former Chiefs cheerleader has now spoken out, slamming him for these remarks. And I keep checking a change.org petition that keeps growing in numbers. There's now more than 140,000 people that have signed a petition calling on the NFL to remove him from the league. And I should say at the same time, he has support. He got a standing ovation when he gave these remarks at the private Catholic liberal arts college, Benedictine College. There's some people that have come out in support of him, but we have heard now from someone who says she was in the room, she's a graduate, she graduated, and she was deeply offended by these comments. Here's what she had to say on TikTok.
Most of the women were looking back and forth at each other like, what the is going on? Yeah, it was definitely horrible, and it definitely made graduation feel a little less special, knowing I had to sit through that and get told I'm nothing but a homemaker.
Now, Butker invoked Taylor Swift in his speech as well, calling her his teammate's girlfriend, which also made a lot of Swifties upset. In fact, Swifties, who have been a large part driving the increase in female viewership of the NFL this past year, have taken to online also to slam the speech. One said if anyone could hold the NFL Chiefs and Butker accountable for misogynistic speeches, it's the Swifties. We generated millions of new income for their organization. It's not a fan base to mess with. Do better, Harrison. So,
is there any indication, though, that his job's at risk? I mean, we heard what the NFL statement said, which is simply that these are his personal remarks, doesn't reflect the league's. Is the sense, you know, from the experts we're talking to, that this is just going to blow over by the time football season kicks off?
Yeah, I mean, definitely they seem to be distancing themselves from him there, that NFL statement. We have not heard a peep from the Chiefs. Okay. We haven't heard anything more from him, but he is one of the best kickers in the league, and so it seems unlikely they're going to want to kick him out of it. Hallie.
Liz Kreutz, thank you very much. You see some of Harrison Butker's stats there as well. Thank you. Still to come here on the show, why a Satanic Temple is fighting so hard for the separation of church and state. That's next in our original. So tonight's original now with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight it's an unexpected but powerful group which says they're fighting to protect the separation of church and state. The Satanic Temple. We told you about them before on this show. Remember, they're battling a lot of conservative movements by fighting for what they say is their members' religious rights. One issue we've seen them gain some traction on is abortion. They've sued states over access to it, even launching what they call the first ever religious abortion clinic network. Now, the Satanic Temple's taking on religion in schools, using new laws in several states to try and get Satanist ministers inside classrooms. Here's Maura Barrett.
Tonight, the Satanic Temple wants to put its own ministers in public schools in both Florida and Oklahoma. It's a move in opposition to conservative lawmakers in those states voting to allow religious chaplains to serve in schools, essentially as counselors.
Chaplains have a very specific role.
13 other states have proposed similar bills this year. The demonic-sounding group using this debate to push back on certain Christian ideals and its increasing overlap on public life.
If they pass these bills, they're going to have to contend with ministers of Satan acting as chaplains within their school districts.
Lucian Greaves, who uses a pseudonym to protect against threats, is a co-founder of the Satanic Temple.
They are going to lose in court. The Constitution is unambiguous about this. You just cannot take a religious identity and cut it out from a public accommodation. They'll have to pay the attorney's fees, and frankly, they shouldn't be putting that kind of budget into this kind of culture war grandstanding BS.
Though in its name, the temple doesn't worship Satan. Instead, describes itself as non-theistic and has become known for inserting itself into various culture wars as an opposition to hardcore Christian ideals.
Whether you agree with them or not, they certainly are very thoughtful about their activism. What they're concerned about is how Christianity is privileged within an American society and has rights that other minority religious groups don't have. And so they see themselves as defenders of religious liberty and the rights of religious minorities.
According to its website, the temple sees Satan as a symbol of eternal rebel in opposition to arbitrary authority and believes in reason, empathy, and the pursuit of knowledge. Their efforts come off as mocking and satirical, but are with serious meaning. One issue it's gaining a lot of traction on: abortion.
Bodily autonomy.
After the overturn of Roe v. Wade, it named a telehealth abortion clinic after Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito's mom, and since sued several states to argue that abortion restrictions violate religious freedom for their members. And then, when Arkansas installed a statue of the Ten Commandments outside its state capitol, the temple unveiled its own statue of the goat-headed figure, Baphomet. The number of congregations of the Satanic Temple more than doubling since 2021 amid the rise of Christian nationalism.
How does this push towards more conservative values play into that from your perspective?
Those who would be drawn to the Satanic Temple are particularly concerned about Christian overreach, and that there is this fear that somehow America, or at least parts of America, are becoming an evangelical Christian theocracy as opposed to a secular democracy.
The temple sees strength in that awareness, in their mission, as they put it, to fight fire with fire.
Maura is joining us now. Super interesting, Maura. Talk through some of the broader goals here, the bigger goals of the activism of the Satanic Temple here.
Hallie, we reported this out with conjunction with our digital colleague Tyler Kincaid, and what we found is even though it's a very unique and unusual form of activism, it's effective. There's arguments and precedent where federal courts have sided with the temple, and essentially what they're doing here is going up against Christian or conservative movements that are trying to upend or break through protections that are already in place, and the temple is working to highlight those inequalities even more so. Hallie.
Maura Barrett, thank you so much, you and Tyler, for that very interesting reporting. Appreciate it. That's a wrap for this hour. I will see you on Sunday on NBC Nightly News, wherever you watch your local NBC station, and back here Monday on NBC News Now. Thanks for watching. More coverage picks up right now. We're coming on the air with new details on the timeline in former President Trump's criminal trial, when it may come to an end, and why things got kind of loud inside that courtroom today. Plus, some breaking news out of Texas, with that state's governor pardoning an ex-Army sergeant convicted of killing a Black Lives Matter protester. The new reaction just coming into us tonight. Plus, the New Jersey senator accused of bribery, revealing his wife's cancer diagnosis just a day after his attorneys appear to try to pin some of the blame on her for the charges he faces. More on how prosecutors are trying to lay out what they see as overwhelming evidence when we take you live to that courthouse. Hey, I'm Hallie, and right as court is wrapping for the day for Donald Trump's trial, we're learning that the jury could end up getting this case as soon as Tuesday, or at least that's when closing arguments may be. That's what the judge told legal teams to be ready for after a pretty testy day in court. Some raised voices, some intense questions, and one thing those 12 jurors will now have to consider. Do you believe Michael Cohen? Because that's the crux of this whole cross-examination of the prosecution's star witness, really this whole trial, with the defense only needing to convince just one person on this jury that Michael Cohen undercut his own testimony today, that Donald Trump's former right-hand man lied and lied some more with little to lose. He is set to be back on the stand again on Monday, and the judge is telling both sides, okay, get ready to wrap it up. Things got kind of spicy today with the former president's lead attorney, Todd Blanche, shouting at one point, that was a lie. You see it here when asking about an October 2016 phone call that Cohen made to Mr. Trump's bodyguard. This was a really key moment. Cohen stood by his story, saying he talked to Mr. Trump on the phone about Stormy Daniels during that call, that it wasn't just about prank calls from a teenager. We're going to get into that in a second. Remember, calls like that are key, because Cohen is the only person who can directly implicate Mr. Trump in this alleged scheme. In other words, prosecutors think he is the guy who can connect the dots directly back to Donald Trump in that alleged hush money scheme, $130,000 paid to Stormy Daniels for her silence about an affair that the former president denies. It's the centerpiece of what prosecutors say is an election interference scheme. Most of the day was really spent going after Cohen's credibility, painting him as somebody out for revenge. Asked if he was angling for a job like chief of staff, Cohen said, "That was for my ego, yes." Asked point blank, "Does the outcome of this trial affect you personally?" Michael Cohen said, "Yes, all of it," playing out in front of more than a dozen Republican allies of Mr. Trump's shown up in person. And check out the line outside court. Look at that. Tons of people, right? And our team says the person to the front of that line paid $1,800 to start sitting there Tuesday night so they could get a seat inside. We'll say it again. New York's hottest club is a downtown Manhattan courtroom. Laura Jarrett's going to break down some of the legal questions in just a second. But I want to start with Rahema Ellis, who's live for us outside the courtroom. Walk us through some of the key moments in that cross-examination today, Rahema, and why it matters, specifically that phone call, that critical phone call that Donald Trump's team tried to zero in on.
Yeah, after essentially a day and a half of testimony in terms of cross-examination, the defense has been painting Michael Cohen as a serial liar. And the phone call that you're referring to, let me read some of this because this is really important. The defense is speaking to Michael Cohen and asking him, "You text Mr. Schiller." He's talking about Keith Schiller, who is the bodyguard for Donald Trump, if you will, and is always next to him. And he says, "Who do you speak to?" You ask Mr. Schiller, "Who do I speak to regarding harassing texts?" And he says, "Call me." Then you call him back at 8:02 for a minute and 30 seconds. Now, that's important, a minute and 30 seconds. Scroll down now a little bit more in terms of this direct cross-examination. And Blanche is asking, you said you had a recollection of a phone call on October 24th at 8:02 p.m. This is just days before we have the November 16th election. And he's going on and saying, and you called Schiller, and he gave the phone to President Trump. And you gave Trump an update, and he said, "Okay, go." In essence, that's in reference to go and pay the money to Stormy Daniels. At that point, Blanche, in a very determined voice, lets out, "That was a lie," as you pointed to earlier. You did not talk to President Trump on that night. You talked to Keith Schiller about what we just went through. And what they went through was a call that Michael Cohen was saying that he got some harassing texts from a 14-year-old. And so what the point is, did you talk to Schiller and the president about the 14-year-old and about Stormy Daniels, all in just 1 minute and 36 seconds? And when Cohen responds, he says, "I'm not certain that is accurate." And he says, "You were certain it was accurate on Tuesday when you were under oath and testifying." Cohen says, "Based upon the records that I reviewed and in light of everything going on, I believe I spoke to Mr. Trump about the Stormy Daniels matter." Blanche, we are not asking for your belief. The jury does not want to hear what you think happened. And then an objection was sustained. And Hallie, again, this is all about, can they paint Michael Cohen to be a serial liar, and therefore nothing that he says about his conversations with Donald Trump are to be believed? Hallie?
Behind the defense table, right, behind where the action was happening in court today, you had folks inside court, as Donald Trump has called them, surrogates, basically, allies of his, a number of Republicans who have made the trek to New York to be in court to show their support for former President Trump. What's it like when you're watching that unfold, to see the politics and the legal collide in such a really vivid way, Rahema?
Well, it's a clash between the politics of what's going on around this trial and what the judge is saying should happen in reference to this trial. There's this gag order on Donald Trump, but the people who are coming in, who are politicians from Washington and who are coming and sitting behind him and then holding news conferences afterwards, they are basically being Donald Trump's voice in violating the gag order because they're saying all kinds of disparaging things about potential witnesses and about the judges, even his daughter, in terms of whether or not the judge is even to be believed. So it is somewhat bizarre that these elected officials are doing what the legal system is suggesting not be done, but they are not under a gag order. And so they are here and they are free to do this. Hallie?
Rahema Ellis, live for us there downtown. Thank you. Let's go to Laura Jarrett, who has spent much of her life downtown over the course of these last few weeks. Laura, we're glad to have you with us here. Talk us through, as it relates to this very quick, like 90-second phone call. And it feels like the question is this: even if the defense did land a punch on Michael Cohen by raising questions about that call, is it going to be enough in the eyes of the jury to taint the testimony from Cohen that we've seen over the course of the last 3 days?
The problem is that it came after hours of the jury hearing about all of the other history of lies that he basically admitted to throughout the entire morning. They walked through his lies to Congress, lies to prosecutors, lies to a federal judge, all of which he basically said, yeah, I did it. And so then to have this punch landed, which, Hallie, I got to tell you, in the room, it was riveting. We had never heard this before. Cohen admits that he never even saw the text messages in his prep with prosecutors. It's unclear what the breakdown is there. We're going to have to do some reporting on that. But it was a pretty stunning moment. It's rare to have that kind of Perry Mason moment in real time. And everybody in the audience was definitely struck by it. The jury, I could see sort of smirking and smiling in some ways. Unclear whether they were smirking and smiling more at Mr. Blanche going so hard or at Mr. Cohen trying to figure out where he should go next. In any event, it was riveting. And I think that the basic line of questioning there was just to show him as an unreliable narrator, to show that he's been picking and choosing what he remembers when, and that this pivotal phone call where he says Trump essentially knew about the deal, he had advanced knowledge. That's a really big point. All of that now cast into doubt.
So then what does Monday look like? How do you expect prosecution and the redirect to try to handle some of this?
I think it's going to be really tough now because they're going to have a long weekend where they don't hear anything. And then we're going to hear more cross-examination of Mr. Cohen on Monday by Todd Blanche. And only then will the prosecution get to redirect and rehabilitate, if you will. I don't know exactly what they'll try to do there and try to explain this conversation with Keith Schiller. I think the only explanation is that you were talking about both things. You were talking about these crank phone calls that you were getting from a teenager at the same time as you're talking about Stormy Daniels. I don't think there's any other way for him to back away because that was his testimony today on the stand, Hallie.
How about what else the defense has left to do here? There's this question of whether they'll call up this witness, Bob Costello, explain who he is and why he matters.
I don't see them calling Bob Costello. Bob Costello is a problematic witness for everybody involved. He's sort of an ancillary character. He was sort of the go-between, if you will, between the Trump camp and Cohen. After the FBI raid, Cohen basically goes dark, and he's sort of using Costello as this go-between. Costello sending him sort of ominous messages saying you want to stay in the fold, basically encouraging him not to flip. I don't think they'll call him. I think the next step is really to go at the actual charges, because even today we left without hearing a peep about the falsification of business records. And so I think they got to go at that on Monday.
And then the judge said, hey, listen, everybody be ready for closing arguments on Tuesday. What does that mean for the timeline? Could the jury end up with this case by the end of the day Tuesday? They're not in court Wednesday. Then it's Memorial Day. What happens?
Yeah, and the judge was really concerned about that, Hallie, because what he doesn't want to do is have there be a big gap or a big lull from between the time that they're given the instructions, which can take a long time. It could take an hour to instruct this jury. It's complicated. There doesn't want to be a big gap between when they're instructed and when they start to deliberate. Or if they, have that long Memorial Day weekend, then they're going to have to come back the following Tuesday. Now we're into the week of the 28th. And so I think we could see them to try to get all of the closing arguments done in one day if the judge has his way. But there's still a lot of arguments left to be done here on the jury instructions. And they're still trying to decide whether they even want to call an expert witness, Hallie. The defense saying they're not sure about that even.
We'll find out more Monday, and you will be there, I know, on the front lines of it all. Laura Jarrett, thank you so much. Appreciate your reporting for us tonight. Let's take you to Washington here. A House panel late today voting to hold the Attorney General in contempt of Congress for defying a request to turn over some audio recordings between President Biden and the special counsel who led that years-long investigation into his handling of classified documents. It's because President Biden is asserting executive privilege over that interview with Robert Hur, who, remember, declined to recommend charges against the president in this case. The latest wrinkle in the plan from some Republicans to investigate the president. The Attorney General himself really slamming the whole thing. Listen.
Now, there have been a series of unprecedented and, frankly, unfounded attacks on the Justice Department. This request, this effort to use contempt as a method of obtaining our sensitive law enforcement files is just the most recent.
Hallie Vitale is following all of this from Capitol Hill. Walk us through it, right? The Judiciary Committee voting to hold him in contempt. What does that mean? Does that have teeth? What's the deal?
Well, look, the Judiciary Committee went this morning. Then we'll see the Oversight Committee later this evening likely do the same thing, a likely party line vote to hold the Attorney General in contempt over a deep desire to get not just the transcript of this interview with Robert Hur and President Joe Biden, which they already have, but to also get the audio. And I should mention here, Hallie, that NBC News is part of a group of news outlets trying to get that audio as well in the argument of, we already have the transcript, this should be public record, and in the name of transparency, that's what should happen. Of course, the Biden administration coming out today and backing up the Attorney General, saying that while they have given the transcript out, that they want to exert executive privilege over the audio recordings of it. And that lands us in the position where we are today, with the administration saying that this is a political act and Congress saying that they are doing this in the name of transparency. That's breaking down along party lines here, and you can hear it from some of the lawmakers on the other side of the building, senators on the Republican side saying this is just more obstruction from the Biden administration, and Democrats saying that this is the latest political move of the week from House Republicans. Hallie.
Wait, and that last sentence you just said, Allie, I mean, like, that encapsulates bigger picture. A lot of what we've heard on the Hill from both of these sides here, right? This continued what Democrats say is a drip, drip, drip from Republicans to go after the Biden administration, from Republicans, this idea that they feel like they're being stonewalled.
It's exactly right. And it's the same thing that we already watched play out with the ultimate impeachment and then the absolution of the Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas. That was a target that Republicans laid out at the early onset of earning the majority here. They were ultimately able to pass impeachment articles against him in the House along party lines, but then that failed in the Senate. This is the first step on Attorney General Merrick Garland. And don't forget, there's also still that lingering impeachment inquiry into the president himself. The committee chairman, Jim Jordan and Jamie Comer, have continuously tried to say that this is all in the name of them trying to get more information for that impeachment inquiry. But the reason it's still an inquiry, Hallie, the reason we haven't seen it be ratcheted up is because they still lack the evidence to convince sufficient numbers of Republicans even that they have what they think they would need to even impeach the current president. All of this sort of drives back to that. It's important to keep in mind.
Allie Vitale live for us on the Hill on this Thursday night. Allie, thank you. Tonight we're getting an inside look at the raid of a sitting senator's home in New Jersey, with testimony in Bob Menendez's bribery trial wrapping up for the day in just the last hour. We're about to see Senator Menendez leaving court in just the last hour or so, as today he's revealing that his wife/co-defendant is being treated for cancer. In a statement, the senator saying his wife Nadine has stage 3 breast cancer requiring a mastectomy. He says he's concerned about the advanced state of the disease. Remember, Nadine Menendez is, as we said, a co-defendant here. Her trial is separate, however. It is happening later on. All of this coming after Menendez's legal team opened their case by appearing to point the finger at her for the presence of gold bars in the couple's home. The senator's defense attorney saying in court yesterday the senator did not have a key to the bedroom closet where the gold bars were found, that only Nadine did, and that only Nadine knew what was inside. Menendez, also in new testimony today, listened to an FBI agent describing giving up on photographing all the cash they were finding in the house. They had to bring in counting machines instead, he said, because it was too much to count by hand. All of it allegedly part of the 18 federal charges that Menendez faces, mostly felonies that have to do with him and his wife allegedly trading political favors for various gifts. It comes as we're getting our first look at the jury makeup, 6 men, 6 women, who will decide whether the senator is guilty or not. NBC's Tom Winter is outside court in New York. Talk about this revelation today that Nadine Menendez is getting treated now for this pretty serious, it sounds like, breast cancer, how that affects what's happening here where you are.
That's right, Hallie. And to your point, this trial was severed. The judge had made the determination well before that jury was impaneled that the cases would be broken apart between Nadine Menendez and her husband, the senator, senior Democratic senator from New Jersey. And the reason for that is that attorneys for both Nadine Menendez and Bob Menendez said, hey, we're going to elicit some testimony here that's going to be pretty damning for the husband or the wife, whichever side it was going to be. And so that was a key reason why the judge said, this is going to be a problem. We shouldn't have this. Also, there's spousal privilege that may come into play. So we're going to separate the two trials. That was before. All we had heard about is that she had a serious illness. Today, as you pointed out, obviously the news, a difficult one for the Menendez family, that she in fact has cancer. So that's what's at stake here when ultimately this case goes to trial for Nadine Menendez. That's been up in the air even before this revelation. So obviously, given her health concerns, that's probably something that's not going to happen anytime soon.
So talk about the actual testimony in court today and where this goes. This FBI agent talking about the bundles of money that they found, all the things that they found in this raid. But have prosecutors been able to tie the cash to the bribery scheme that's at the center of this?
Yeah, well, if you ever wanted to see what the senior center of New Jersey's home looked like, the jurors got a complete view of it today as they pretty much went room to room, Hallie. They set up and collected the evidence when that search warrant was executed on the Menendez home in the kitchen of that home. And we went into what is Menendez's office. People saw how that is set up, but they also saw a lot of images of duffel bags filled with cash, boots filled with cash, just envelopes from banks. So, you know, if you go to the bank and you were to withdraw a significant amount of money, they put it in an envelope. They write down how much money is on it, $10,000. In one duffel bag, over $100,000. All told, Hallie, between those counting machines that you referenced and the FBI agents counting it, they say they had over $486,000 of cash inside that home. And so it's that cash, those gold bars that are obviously going to be so key from a physical evidence standpoint in this case. And obviously we can expect to see more documents and hear more testimony, including an FBI agent walking through the alleged scheme with one of those countries next week, Hallie.
Tom Winter live for us there outside court in Lower Manhattan. Not that court, the other one. Tom, thank you. We got to get to some breaking news out of Texas now with the Republican governor there pardoning a man convicted of murdering a Black Lives Matter protester back in 2020. We're learning in just the last couple hours here he is now out of prison. It means that 25-year sentence for former U.S. Army Sergeant Daniel Perry has now been nullified. Again, that was a sentence for shooting and killing Garrett Foster, a 28-year-old man at a protest in Austin. All of Perry's rights will now be restored. Perry admits to shooting Foster, who you see here, while driving an Uber in Austin. His attorneys argue that because Foster was armed, Perry was acting in self-defense. Greg Abbott saying in a statement in just the last hour, Texas has, in his words, one of the strongest stand-your-ground laws in the country, and that, I'm quoting again here, that it cannot be nullified, he says, by a jury or a progressive district attorney. I want to get right to Kathy Park here. Perry is now out of prison. What happens now? What's the reaction been?
Hey there, Hallie. That's right. He's no longer an inmate. As you said, his rights have been restored. So it's like the conviction didn't even happen. So if he wanted to have a firearm, that is something that he is legally allowed to do. We actually saw a statement in the Washington Post. His attorney actually said his client is thrilled and elated to be free. He wishes that his tragic event never happened and wishes he never had to defend himself against Mr. Foster's unlawful actions. And I want to tick through some more reactions. Hallie, the DA who prosecuted the case, obviously he's not happy about this decision. He slammed the decision, writing in part, they have sent a message to Garrett Foster's family, to his partner, and to our community that his life does not matter. They have sent the message that the service of the Travis County community members who served on the grand jury and trial jury does not matter. We also saw a statement from the Texas Attorney General, and he also wrote Soros-backed prosecutors like Jose Garza do not get to pick and choose the rights we have as Americans, and I'm relieved that justice has prevailed. So, Hallie, it's interesting, you know, about a year ago, April of 2023, that's when Perry was convicted. But shortly after that, a lot of conservatives slammed that decision. Governor Abbott also weighed in, and that's why he wanted to expedite this pardon. So roughly a year later, Daniel Perry is a free man. Hallie?
Kathy Park, thank you very much for that, coming into us late tonight. Appreciate it. Overseas now, Russian President Vladimir Putin today thanking the Chinese leader for China's proposals to end the war in Ukraine as the Chinese continue to send Russia equipment to use in that invasion. A lot of pomp and circumstance for Putin's two-day visit. Look at some of that here. And it comes as tensions are rising between both countries and the U.S. Janice Mackey-Frere has more.
This is a key visit for Vladimir Putin, his first foreign trip since securing another 6 years in power, and he received a grand welcome with red carpets, pageantry, and a military band. The no limits partnership that Russia shares with China, as well as the close personal ties between Putin and Xi Jinping, are arguably among his most important. The two have met over 40 times, and the timing of this visit is significant, with Russia intensifying its war in Ukraine, while the U.S. is intensifying pressure on China to do more to stop it. The two leaders are marking the 75th anniversary of China-Russia ties. Xi Jinping said that it's a relationship that should be cherished and nurtured. In addition to his remarks, he said the two should work to resolve so-called hot issues like the Israel-Gaza conflict. And as well, quote, both sides agreed that a political solution to the Ukraine crisis is the right direction, end of quote. That's a settlement that would no doubt benefit Russia. Already, the U.S. has sanctioned some Chinese companies for the sale of so-called dual-use goods to Russian companies, things like machine tools, electronics, and semiconductors that U.S. officials say are in turn being used to manufacture tanks and other weaponry for the war in Ukraine. These are allegations that China has denied. Still, China is walking a tightrope. The Biden administration is said to be considering extending sanctions to Chinese banks, and that would be a huge setback here. In his remarks today, Xi Jinping didn't allude to those warnings from the U.S. and stuck to China's position on Ukraine, saying, quote, reasonable security concerns of all parties should be respected.
Our thanks to Janice Mackey-Freyer for that reporting. Lots more to get to coming up here on the show, including a promising new drug that could help millions of women going through menopause. But there's a catch. We'll tell you why it's not going to be accessible for everyone. Plus, an answer to an age-old question. Are tacos sandwiches? A Massachusetts teenager who participated in a spicy chip challenge. Do you remember that? An autopsy report shows that he died from eating a high amount of chili pepper extract. This happened last year as part of that viral one-chip challenge. The 14-year-old also had an enlarged heart and a congenital heart defect, according to the report. The chip manufacturer, the chip maker, Pocky, pulled the product from store shelves not long after he died. They have not responded to AP's request for comment. Number two, the Justice Department has taken a big step toward reclassifying cannabis as a lower-risk drug today, with the DEA submitting a notice that basically starts the ball rolling to try to get that to happen. President Biden says it's a monumental move toward reversing longstanding inequities. Number three, the TSA says it's getting ready for what's expected to be the busiest summer travel season ever, starting with Memorial Day weekend next week. Something like 18 million people are set to be screened by the TSA during that weekend. So if you are traveling, they say give yourself lots of time. It's not the weekend to cut it close, folks. Number four, Wayfair is opening up its first in-person store in Illinois, a 150,000 square foot mega store. It'll open up next week. Number five, tacos. A judge is ruling officially on whether a taco is a sandwich, is a burrito a sandwich. The judge says yes. Basically, this Mexican restaurant wasn't allowed to open up in a shopping center because zoning laws there only let businesses open that sold made-to-order sandwiches. The judge said, well, a taco and a burrito, those are Mexican-style sandwiches, the judge says. So the restaurant is allowed to open up there after all. Some new warnings tonight out of Indonesia after a volcano alert is now being raised to its highest level yet. Plus, why people in Hong Kong are racing up a tower of buns. Tower of buns, folks, coming up. So even if you are not currently going through menopause, you've probably heard about it, right? The hot flashes, the night sweats. Maybe you or somebody you love has dealt with it, of course, some of these menopause symptoms. Well, now a new non-hormonal drug that Bayer's working on seems to be helping with those symptoms quite a bit, according to new research. It comes with a catch, however. That catch is the price tag. It could cost as much as $700 a month. And a lot of insurance companies don't want to pay for it. Still, this could help a lot of women. Remember, here in the U.S., some 6,000 women reach menopause every day. Nearly 8 in 10 get hot flashes, but less than half get treatment for it. Dr. Natalie Azar joins us now. Interesting here on these new findings. It has the potential to help a lot of women. Obviously, the question is, how do you pay for it?
I know. Yeah, and what's super frustrating about this, Hallie, is that if this drug gets approved, remember these are, late phase 3 trials, if the drug gets approved, it's going to be an FDA drug that's approved for an indication, but your insurance company might say to the patient, no, you actually have to try 1 or 2 non-FDA approved medications before and fail those before we will approve it. This, unfortunately, Hallie, we're all too familiar. This happens all the time. What I would say to people out there, if this is on your radar, and this is something that you want to try, and it gets denied from your insurance company, you definitely have to reach out to your doc. They might be able to write a letter of medical necessity and appeal that decision. And doctors' offices and the drug company very often will also have copay cards and coupons, but it's super frustrating. It's a pill. It doesn't need to cost that much.
Well, I don't know. We just reported here on the show. I'm trying to think of when it was, fairly recently, within the last couple of weeks here, about that. Yeah, that's what it was. This new study that found that hormone replacement therapy to treat menopause is relatively safe for younger women. Big deal, because there had been reluctance toward this treatment for a long time. All of which is to say, it does feel like there is this moment now where the medical field is talking more openly about menopause. I wonder if you're seeing that with your patients, too. Like, groups of women are talking more about it in a way that maybe feels a little less like something we got to whisper about. It's
I mean, I think that's true. Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that's been true over the last couple of years, talking about miscarriages and talking about, oh my God, now I'm blanking. I'm always laughing that, postpartum depression. My goodness, how can I even forget about it? I had it twice. But I think it is important that we're talking about it. I think social media is also making this, much more relevant for people talking about it on TikTok and whatnot. I mean, if you think about, Viagra was approved, gosh, how many decades ago, and we were talking about men's sexual health and anything that has to do with women's reproductive system or something is a little bit less, that we're less comfortable talking about. I think it speaks a lot to how medical research and science over the years has disproportionately been concentrated on men's health as opposed to women's health. So a medication like this is certainly a long time coming. It'll be great for the women who are not candidates for hormonal therapy. And I hope that we see more things like this to come.
Dr. Natalie Azar, we're glad to have you talking about all of it. Come back anytime to talk about any of it. Thank you so much. NBC News covers hundreds of international stories every day. And because it can be tough to read or watch or listen to them all, our teams around the world have done it for you. Here's a look at what they're watching in a segment we call The Global. Out of Slovakia, officials have charged a man with attempted murder and described him as a lone wolf after the prime minister was shot in an assassination attempt multiple times yesterday. He is still in very serious but stable condition. There's no word on any kind of motive here, at least not a clear one. The country's interior minister says the suspect did not belong to any political groups. Out of Indonesia, officials are raising the alert level for a volcano on a remote island to the highest it can be because its eruptions are getting bigger every day. That's from a distance, what you're looking at now. Imagine it up close. The volcano started erupting a couple days ago. Now, officials are warning people it could end up spewing out lava as well. They're holding off on evacuation orders from now. And out of Hong Kong, thousands of people getting together to watch a bun scrambling competition, celebrating the end of the annual bun-themed festival. 12 people climbed to the top of this tower. They're doing what the competition says. They're collecting buns. Whoever gets the bun from the top of the tower, the top bun, brings luck to their family. Coming up, new backlash tonight for that Chiefs kicker who gave that controversial commencement speech we've told you about. How Taylor Swift fans are now getting involved. Next. Some pressure is building off the field tonight for the Kansas City Chiefs kicker after what critics are calling his misogynistic comments at a college commencement. An NFL official saying those were personal remarks and that his views do not represent the league's. We're talking about Harrison Butker, of course, whose speech at a Catholic University over the weekend saw him railing on everything from abortion to birth control to Pride Month to COVID, with a big chunk of his address dedicated to his view that women should be homemakers and not so much pursuing careers outside the house. Here's what I'm talking about.
I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now, about to cross this stage, and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? But I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world.
Comments like those kicking up a lot of backlash for the reigning Super Bowl champ kicker, and a little bit of trolling, too. Look at what the LA Chargers did, giving Butker a cameo when they announced their schedule for next season with a Sims-themed video. Look at this. That's supposed to be Butker there in that number 7 jersey, helping out around the house. Being the homemaker he apparently believes simply women can be. NBC's Liz Kreutz is following this one for us. You know, what's interesting, Liz, is we talked about this last night on the show, and even in the course of the last 36 hours, there has been more and more backlash, more and more of a spotlight on Harrison Butker. The whole thing just keeps building momentum.
Exactly. It's the definition of going viral. It just keeps getting spread more and more, and then we keep getting more backlash. In fact, just moments ago, I saw that a former Chiefs cheerleader has now spoken out, slamming him for these remarks. And I keep checking a change.org petition that keeps growing in numbers. There's now more than 140,000 people that have signed a petition calling on the NFL to remove him from the league. And I should say at the same time, he has support. He got a standing ovation when he gave these remarks at the private Catholic liberal arts college, Benedictine College. There's some people that have come out in support of him, but we have heard now from someone who says she was in the room, she graduated, and she was deeply offended by these comments. Here's what she had to say on TikTok.
Most of the women were looking back and forth at each other like, what the is going on? Yeah, it was definitely horrible, and it definitely made graduation feel a little less special, knowing I had to sit through that and get told I'm nothing but a homemaker.
Now, Butker invoked Taylor Swift in his speech as well, calling her his teammate's girlfriend, which also made a lot of Swifties upset. In fact, Swifties, who have been a large part driving the increase in female viewership of the NFL this past year, have taken to online also to slam the speech. One said if anyone could hold the NFL Chiefs and Butker accountable for misogynistic speeches, it's the Swifties. We generated millions of new income for their organization. It's not a fan base to mess with. Do better, Harrison. So,
is there any indication, though, that his job's at risk? I mean, we heard what the NFL statement said, which is simply that these are his personal remarks, doesn't reflect the league's. Is the sense, you know, from the experts you're talking to that this is just going to blow over by the time football season kicks off?
Yeah, I mean, definitely they seem to be distancing themselves from him there, that NFL statement. We have not heard a peep from the Chiefs. Okay. We haven't heard anything more from him, but he is one of the best kickers in the league, and so it seems unlikely they're going to want to kick him out of it. Hallie.
Liz Kreutz, thank you very much. You see some of Harrison Butker's stats there as well. Thank you. Still to come here on the show, why a Satanic Temple is fighting so hard for the separation of church and state. That's next in our original. So tonight's original now with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been watching. And tonight it's an unexpected but powerful group which says they're fighting to protect the separation of church and state. The Satanic Temple. We told you about them before on this show. Remember, they're battling a lot of conservative movements by fighting for what they say is their members' religious rights. One issue we've seen them gain some traction on is abortion. They've sued states over access to it, even launching what they call the first ever religious abortion clinic network. Now, the Satanic Temple is taking on religion in schools, using new laws in several states to try and get Satanist ministers inside classrooms. Here's Maura Barrett.
Tonight, the Satanic Temple wants to put its own ministers in public schools in both Florida and Oklahoma. It's a move in opposition to conservative lawmakers in those states voting to allow religious chaplains to serve in schools, essentially as counselors.
Chaplains have a very specific role.
13 other states have proposed similar bills this year. The demonic-sounding group using this debate to push back on certain Christian ideals and its increasing overlap on public life.
If they pass these bills, they're going to have to contend with ministers of Satan acting as chaplains within their school districts.
Lucian Greaves, who uses a pseudonym to protect against threats, is a co-founder of the Satanic Temple.
They're going to lose in court. The Constitution is unambiguous about this. You just cannot take a religious identity and cut it out from a public accommodation. They'll have to pay the attorney's fees, and frankly, they shouldn't be putting that kind of budget into this kind of culture war grandstanding BS.
Though in its name, the temple doesn't worship Satan. Instead, describes itself as non-theistic and has become known for inserting itself into various culture wars as an opposition to hardcore Christian ideals.
Whether you agree with them or not, they certainly are very thoughtful about their activism. What they're concerned about is how Christianity is privileged within an American society and has rights that other minority religious groups don't have. And so they see themselves as defenders of religious liberty and the rights of religious minorities.
According to its website, the temple sees Satan as a symbol of eternal rebel in opposition to arbitrary authority and believes in reason, empathy, and the pursuit of knowledge. Their efforts come off as mocking and satirical, but are with serious meaning. One issue it's gaining a lot of traction on: abortion.
Bodily autonomy.
After the overturn of Roe v. Wade, it named a telehealth abortion clinic after Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito's mom, and since sued several states to argue that abortion restrictions violate religious freedom for their members. And then, when Arkansas installed a statue of the Ten Commandments outside its state capitol, the temple unveiled its own statue of the goat-headed figure, Baphomet. The number of congregations of the Satanic Temple more than doubling since 2021 amid the rise of Christian nationalism.
How does this push towards more conservative values play into that from your perspective?
Those who would be drawn to the Satanic Temple are particularly concerned about Christian overreach, and that there is this fear that somehow America, or at least parts of America, are becoming an evangelical Christian theocracy as opposed to a secular democracy.
The temple sees strength in that awareness, in their mission, as they put it, to fight fire with fire.
Maura is joining us now. Super interesting, Maura. Talk through some of the broader goals here, the bigger goals of the activism of the Satanic Temple here.
Hallie, we reported this out with conjunction with our digital colleague Tyler Kincaid, and what we found is even though it's a very unique and unusual form of activism, it's effective. There's arguments and precedent where federal courts have sided with the temple, and essentially what they're doing here is going up against Christian or conservative movements that are trying to upend or break through protections that are already in place, and the temple is working to highlight those inequalities even more so. Hallie.
Maura Barrett, thank you so much, you and Tyler, for that very interesting reporting. Appreciate it. That's a wrap for this hour. I will see you on Sunday on NBC Nightly News, wherever you watch your local NBC station, and back here Monday on NBC News Now. Thanks for watching. More coverage picks up right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.